Welcome and thanks for braving the miserable weather on this last day of February to come here. I think it's a sturdy group, a group that is resilient, which is very good for the theme of this evening. My name is Glenn Saxe. I'm the director of the NYU Child Study Center, and I chair our Department of Child Psychiatry. And I've been a New Yorker and at NYU for a year and a half now, and I'm thrilled to be focusing and having this event on child and adult resilience to mark the occasion. There's many reasons that I'm happy about tonight, and to see a great crowd of friends and people I've met and know and want to meet. A few particular reasons. One, to have the opportunity to let you know my team. I took over a center in the department with truly an all-star team of really thoughtful people, and I can't wait to show them off to you tonight. The second reason I'm really excited is that this topic on child resiliency is something that I've dedicated my clinical and research career to. If I were to identify maybe the one thing that defines my career, it's how to help kids succeed in the face of adversity. And I think it's a really important topic, and my guess is that that topic is something important to you for coming here today. A third reason I'm really excited is because, where's Tom Murphy? Where are you? Oh, there you are, good. To introduce Tom Murphy Jr. to our NYU family. Tom is the new chair of our advisory board. Tom is a member of the NYU Langone Board of Trustees, and his family has been involved with lifelong multi-generational commitment to the well-being of kids. And as we've gotten to know each other, I can't imagine a better chair for our board. So thank you for being here. On that note, many of our advisory board members are here. And I want to thank the gang for their amazing and dedicated efforts working with us. I mentioned an all-star team. I have a board that's an all-star team, and we have really, the last meeting was unbelievable for its energy and thoughtfulness. In particular, I want to thank our advisory board members, Sarah and David Fizel, for enabling us to host an event in such a great place. Where's Sarah and David? Are you? Thanks, guys. This is a great place. So my role tonight is to set it up, to set the stage here to talk about resilience. So in this evening dedicated to the idea of resilience, before going much further, let's stop and say, what is resilience? And although many definitions have been offered, it more or less means doing well in the face of challenge. The notion of how a child or adult succeeds when confronted with adversity. This issue has been deeply important to families over millennia because adversity is just built into the fabric of life. We all know that you can't get through childhood without facing adversity. And if I had a magic wand and I were to eliminate adversity from the human mix, I don't think I'd be doing anyone a service, because that's what helps someone become successful, how people face adversity. And there's a terrible and ancient, actually, dilemma for families. Here we are, we want to protect our kids, and we also want them to succeed. So we must grapple with and understand what it means. So in short, our goal tonight, and quite an ambitious goal, I don't think we'll have final answers, is to help families think through some of these issues. It's worth noting that when I talk about adversity and we talk about adversity, we're talking about a whole range of experiences, from more mundane things like peer and family conflict to challenging experiences such as family illness, divorce, to more extreme experiences which are sadly, tragically Also with us, violence, abuse, life-threatening illness, and injury. My own area of research has been about resilience, as I was saying, and for many years I studied children who were hospitalized with injuries and significant burns, and studied what helped children in that context to do okay and what made kids not do okay. Well, here's one take-home message that we've shown, and it's many other people have also shown, that about 75% of children facing such challenges actually do okay. 25% don't do okay. Why? It's a very complex question. I don't presume to say it's an easy answer. It includes genes, it includes environments, many things. My group, for example, has discovered 2 genes related to resilience and managing adversity and doing okay. But let's take a step back. The most fundamental answer to this question involves a lot of common sense. Actually, the common sense has been transmitted to us generation by generation through cultures and communities which have survived over the ages because they've developed useful human practices to help their members manage adversity. There is a great deal of wisdom that comes to us from across the ages, and we have to know that our work exists within that context, and not to pay careful attention to that is a very big mistake. So what is important? What do we take from the ages? What do we think about when we think what helps kids manage and do well? Our group thinks that there's many things, but any proper accounting of resilience has to include at least the following 4 things. 1, children grow up in families and communities, and resilience cannot be understood independent of the social world in which kids are embedded. You can't really think about a kid without a family, a neighborhood, a culture. It's just, it misses something very big. 2, reality is important. There are tremendous trade-offs to shielding a child from the realities they must face. We must help children to learn about and manage the realities that confront them, obviously in a developmentally appropriate way. 3, loss and losing is part of the reality of life. To be successful adults, children must learn how to learn from losing. Children must employ courage in the face of loss, and to use courage to take risks that may entail loss. 4, children must learn to be accountable for their behavior. They must learn self-control. Ethics and good habits matter a lot. There are no shortcuts to success. It always involves hard work over the long term. So, I've said enough. We have a stupendous panel here to talk about this vital topic, and I want to thank all the panelists for being here tonight. I especially want to thank Perri Peltz, our moderator. We're really lucky to have you, and I'm really grateful that Scott Greenstein, who can't be here but is our newest board member, suggested you. So let's get started. And to introduce Perri, Perri's the host of SiriusXM Network's Doctor Radio Reports. Most recently, she was anchor and reporter for NBC News, ABC, and CNN, where she has focused on issues related to poverty and health. And with that, Perri, please take it away.
Okay. Dr. Saxe, thank you so much. Welcome, everybody. I know this is not the nicest of nights to be out, but we appreciate your being here. It is such an important topic. I just want to let you know a little bit about the way it's going to work. I'm going to ask our panelists a few questions, and then we're going to open it up to audience questions, so everybody will have a chance to ask our panelists questions. So let me begin, Dr. Hirsch, with you, because you're right in the middle. Seems like a good place to start. You've also been the medical director of the Child Study Center from its beginning, which is now almost 15 years, is that right?
15 plus.
Like I said, 15 plus. And it's probably fair to say that you've seen a lot. And when you listen to Dr. Saxe speak about resiliency and what the factors are that contribute to a child's ability to be resilient, you look at the other extreme, which is children who have faced tremendous adversity and yet are resilient in spite of what they faced. Can you talk to us a little bit about that?
Sure. I sit here with several hats and several roles. I want to talk to you about my role as a child psychiatrist and as part of a team. The team you see here, the 5 of us, really represent just 10% of the entire clinical team of the department. And probably we represent here, I don't want to look at age, but probably about 100 years worth of clinical care. And one of the things that we see is so many kids and so many families in which there's severe illness. And I think one of the things that we look at, which families ask 2 questions of us. One is the past, what did we do wrong? The second is the future. You know, is my child doomed for life? Are things so bad that we can't turn around? And I don't take out a crystal ball because I can't read crystal balls. I don't read TVs either. But I would tell you that by and large, I think that children and families are so much more resilient than we give them credit for. And one of the areas that I think resilience really flourishes is when families and children have tap the wider resource of the community, of the culture that they're in many cases of the religion or spirituality that they're part of. I saw a woman yesterday, a woman who I've been treating now since she was 10 years old, and that was about 25 years ago. She suffered from severe obsessive compulsive disorder and had a really troubled adolescent years, and is doing quite well now, married with 2 kids. And we were reminiscing as she came in for an annual kind of visit, how far she's come and how well she's done. And she said to me, you know, Dr. Hirsch, I couldn't have done it without, and I'm thinking to myself, well, she's going to give me a compliment. And that's so nice. And she's without the Lord, she says. And she's a member of a Baptist church. She's actually an organist in the church. And for her, the idea of being part of religion and having kind of a sense of a higher meaning and spirituality, I think in many ways is what helped her succeed. I helped her along, but I think that really was a critical factor for her. And I think I see that, and I think my colleagues see that in so many ways, that when people have developed a meaning and a thought about the future for themselves, be part of a culture, be part of religion, or any kind of community, that really supports them. Because relationships is really what make resiliency.
So when you speak about children who are resilient in the face of adversity, do you think it argues for a genetic component to resiliency?
So now I put on my other hat. I'm a father of 5. I'm a grandfather of 6. I live in a community in which my siblings live. My sister-in-law and brother-in-law live, and so there's 17 nieces and nephews that live in the same neighborhood as I. And I would tell you, yes, genes probably play a role in that kids have different temperaments. They come to this world with different styles. My older son of my 2 sons, you know, he's the kind of kid from day one, he's this angelic-looking kind of kid. Everybody kind of tells you how great he is, how wonderful he is. And again, I say to myself, child psychiatrist, of course, I'm raising a kid. My wife's a special education teacher. And so a spiritual power or God decided, I'm going to get back at you. He sends me my second son, James. And from day one, James' temperament is quite different. And he's difficult. And he's the kind of kid, and I recall at age 8 or 7, he's now 25 or 26, he's doing pretty well. But we had friends over for dinner. I disappeared for 20 minutes, and they reminded me a couple of years ago that they found me sitting on top of them. And so we used to joke, my wife and I, that if we ever get divorced, the question was, who wouldn't have custody? Who wouldn't have custody? And so yes,
trumps that way completely. And so it's what we have the ability to really shape this environment, to use our skills as parents and as community to really trump whatever the genetics.
Dr. Verduin, let me move to you, the original guys personally. As the clinical director of the Institute for ADHD and Disruptive Behavior Disorders, you see a lot of younger children and children with attentional deficits and disruptive behaviors. We've now heard both Dr. Hirsch and Dr. Saxe speak about the principles of resiliency. Can you help us understand how those principles apply to children with behavioral issues?
Sure. So the kids that I see, by and large, one of the chief factors that they all have in common is that they have a lot of difficulty with self-control. And it's not a surprise then that, although we just heard from Dr. Hirsch the importance of community, tradition, and family in supporting the resilience of the child, the parents I work with are really most interested in how to promote resilience through developing and teaching self-reliance. That's a very common theme in the work that I do. Will my child be able to face life on his or her own one day without us needing to pack their backpack or what interference in the school meetings that we seem to have to keep going to? And most of the parents I work with for the present would say that they do too much for their kids, yet at the same time what they're doing doesn't appear to be enough help, which is a cruel paradox. We try to help them see the other side of that paradox, which is that the right support now can really foster independence later. But the question is, how do you do that? And so that's generally what we do in the parent training work. We try to find practical ways to take concepts like that sound like platitudes to a lot of parents and make them real. One example of how to do that is a skill called scaffolding, which actually has its roots in developmental psychology and how kids learn. The idea of scaffolding is that you provide just enough support for your kid, just enough so that they can grow on their own. But you're always looking for an opportunity to peel that support back. As if your child's a sapling and you have the canes holding them up, you remove them once they're strong enough to stand up on their own. So what we try to do with parents is try to help them find ways to reframe kind of the everyday tasks as opportunities to practice scaffolding. So back to the backpack thing. How do you help your child learn how to pack their own backpack? How do you peel that support away slowly? How do you help them ask for help when they get frustrated? How do you help them repair a rift in a friendship? I'm a parent myself, and I know that too often parenting is kind of a vacillation between just getting through the day and having these fleeting moments of panic about the future. So when we talk about fostering resilience in the work that I do, it's about trying to bridge that gap. How do we get the mundane tasks of today to be the curriculum for future strength?
I just took a note, scaffold when you get home.
Me too.
And I got a lot of scaffolding to do. So are children then with behavioral issues more or less capable of being resilient?
Well, it depends on whether you go with the temperament route or with the environment and the life experience route. I would say temperamentally, these kids come into life with some of the signs of more rigidity or brittleness as opposed to resilience, yet they have many, many life experiences that many of the kids I've worked with over years would say have shaped them greatly in positive ways.
Okay, Dr. Nishawala, who's sitting right there on the right of Dr. Verduin. Dr. Nishawala is the medical director of the Autism Spectrum Disorders Clinical and Research Program, and in that position you've obviously seen a lot of children on the autism spectrum. For your patients or the families who are raising a child with a mental health or learning difference, talk to us, Dr. Nishawala, about some of the tools that parents can use to help a child on the spectrum work and develop resiliency.
Sure. So I love to think of examples to help understand that. And so if you think about that rigidity, some of the kids that I see who are on the autism spectrum are some of the most rigid kids out there. They really have a lot of trouble with being flexible. So I was thinking of an 11-year-old girl that I treat who came in for a session with her parents. She's mild on the autism spectrum, but certainly has enough symptoms that it impacts her significantly. And right in the middle of session, she reveals, her parents haven't heard this before, that they've been trying to build resilience in her because they let her have some tasks. She's 11 now. They live on a safe block, and they're going to let her walk to the store with her money for her snack, buy a snack, and come back. So they hear that a couple of weeks ago, She went to the store, and on her way to the store, a man asked her for her money that she was carrying with her. And she didn't tell the shop owner, and she didn't tell her parents when she got home. But in the middle of the session, she revealed that this had happened. So why? Why did she say in session that this had happened? And I think it's a useful idea to think about this resilience, because what did her parents do when they found out that a stranger had approached her and asked her for money, and they didn't know that this had happened? They were panicked, like they were so upset, like. And of course, so if you think about it as parents, what's the first thing you do when you're feeling very panicky, when your child has just said something? They were astute enough to watch me, and I waved them off, because what they wanted to do, they started, and the dad had actually started a little bit to say, what are you talking about? Like, what happened? Why didn't you know what you're supposed to do? You're supposed to tell us this happened. And you could see her kind of. And the reason she brought it in session, she knew that I would make sure that she was heard, and that her parents would listen, and they would understand something about what happened, and that we would figure, because obviously she realized this was not good, that someone had tried to come up to her and talk to her, and she was thinking about it ever since then, but wasn't sure what to say. And so together we talked about it. So if you think about that, there's parts that are, in this resilience, there are parts that are I have. I like to think of I have, I am, I can. And so I have parents who love me and care about me, rules and structure and limits that make sense, a larger community, a higher power, a higher faith, perhaps, and people who encourage me to become more independent. So their parents were doing a good job with that. They were giving her her $1 to go to the store. And so then what is I have, then I am. I am, we talked about lovable and likable. So there's that temperament of someone who is pleasing. And she has that, for sure. I am someone who cares about other people and what happens to them. I am proud of myself. I am someone who is optimistic about my future. So those are things, and then I can are the skills that we could actually teach her. So this is where there was a teachable moment in there. What can we teach her now about what can she do? Not just scold her or tell her, but teach her in that moment. She didn't know what to do. And then she didn't tell because she was afraid that she was going to be told she can't go to the store anymore.
I think sometimes it's easier for the clinician or the teacher or the doctor to be that person who does that. And as the parent, it's scary.
Absolutely.
I think what I guess I want to ask, and I hope I'm phrasing this or asking this properly, but sometimes you don't know what is the behavioral issue or the pathology, as opposed to what is just a behavioral problem that parents can help shape. You don't know where that fine line is, and as a parent, sometimes you're scared to jump in.
That's a great question, Perri.
That's why they pay me the big bucks.
People they think in that moment, they must be all-knowing and do exactly the right thing in that moment. And it's not like that, because resilience is something that builds. There are many teachable moments. This is a time, to step back. Don't jump in there automatically. Think for a minute. Kids ask questions that you don't know the answers to all the time, and people feel like they have to have the answer right away. Ask another question back at the child, put it back to them. Where were you thinking about that? That you don't have to know in that moment. And there will be many more moments to teach that.
Right, absolutely. Dr. Barbara Coffey down at the end. Dr. Coffey is the director of the Tics and Tourette's Clinical and Research Program at the Child Study Center, and is one of the 3 MDs on the panel here. So I want to ask you a broader question, which is, are there any special considerations from the medical neurological brain development perspective that we should be thinking about when we talk about this larger topic of resiliency?
Sure, and absolutely. We are fortunate to be in an era of neuroscience and being able to understand a lot of clinical phenomena from the basis of what goes on in the brain. We're fortunate at NYU to have a Neuroscience Institute, and I see that as an opportunity to really develop our understanding of mental health issues in children. there are actually correlates in the brain, and this is another conversation, not for tonight, of resilience. We know that there are genetic vulnerabilities that in some people interact with trauma in the environment, as Dr. Saxe mentioned, that create mood disorders and depression. So we know there's a very firm foundation in neuroscience. There are imaging studies to look at areas of the brain. There are genetic studies. There are animal models. If you look at animal models, if you compare the rodents who were licked a lot as infants by their parents to those who aren't licked a lot, that grooming behavior really has an impact upon the baby mouse's development and ultimately resilience. So there's a lot of grounding in neuroscience these days that's opening up a huge field of knowledge that will have direct relevance to mental health. I'll give you a very quick example of a wonderful case where I think it illustrates a lot of the aspects that Dr. Saxe talked about in terms of the components of resilience. This was a 12-year-old boy who had been diagnosed and treated for Tourette's disorder, which is multiple tics. He had movements, he had barking and shouting, very, very disabling symptoms. He was 12 years old when I first saw him. He was treated at another institution. He came to me for another opinion. This child had been on a very strong medicine for many years. He had gained a tremendous amount of weight, and he was refusing to go to school, which was really an emergency at the time I saw him, to not be able to go to school. Fortunately, he had wonderful parents who were absolutely steadfast and devoted to him, very connected to community organizations, and very connected to the Tourette Syndrome Association, which is an advocacy group with a very strong chapter in the community. Gradually over time, I just saw this young man, he's 17 now. We got him off the medicine. We got him back to school first, got him off the medicine, got him involved in a support group in the community, got him exercising, which he'd not done before, and exercise has neuroprotective effects. So we were working at a lot of different dimensions of drawing upon his own capacities for resilience. What was most interesting is that this young man, a couple of years ago, was able to reach out to an actor on an HBO special on Tourette's disorder, find a way to reach him on the phone and talk to him. This was an actor who had had Tourette's as a kid, had been bullied and stigmatized, eventually became a teacher and told his story on an HBO TV show. This young man reached out to this actor, and there was something about that and his ability to take action with his own situation and identify with this successful man who'd come a long way that really, I think, was the catalyst to get him to the next step. I saw him a couple of weeks ago. He's off all medication. He's slimmed down. He looks gorgeous. He's already accepted at college. He's a senior there. And I actually have, with his parents' permission, who've been supportive throughout the whole period, given his name to my colleague Ruth Mass, who's our pediatric neurologist, who's got a couple of kids that are really struggling with tics right now, as a potential patient to talk to other patients about how you get through this. So I think actively accepting reality, dealing with his self-control issues, going back to school, talking to his peers about his disorder, and then being able to draw upon others' experience, I think was really a wonderful example of what we'd like to build.
That's a great story. You see that interplay of neurology then and the environment all the time. So given that tension, how do you feel about our ability as parents then to really help our children build resiliency?
I think you have to work with what you have, and I think not all of our patients have resilience when they come in, whether it's temperamental, whether it's genetic, whether it's parents who are feeling a little overwhelmed. I think we have to work with all the aspects that we draw on. Certainly the community has been a big support in schools. We send kids to the school to talk about what their problems are so other people will understand, and by and large, other kids accept children with tics if they know what it is, and they know, for example, if they're younger kids, it's not contagious, things of that sort. So I think we can really, on a practical basis, draw upon the resources that our families bring with us, and then try to develop those skills that need to be developed.
Great. Dr. Laurie Evans, sitting right there, saving last but not least, and saving the very tough questions for you, because of course it's time to talk about teens and tweens. And as the parent of 3 teens, I think this is very difficult. But when we talk about the principles of resiliency, how can we apply those to the teenage years? Or can you?
I think the absolute good news about resilience and teenagers, many of the things we talk about are early intervention. Get them early, give them the roots. That's what everyone's talking about. When we reach adolescence, it's about changing from the roots to giving them the wings to fly on their own. And that's really what adolescence is about. And I think the good part about resilience is we still have things that we can do with teenagers that are effective. And I think one of the things we still do as parents is we're good models for change. I can speak about myself. My first day at the Child Study Center was September 11th, 2011. I was hired as, my job was supposed to be split as a school partnership job and part of the ADHD service. So I came into work that first day, and in the afternoon, Glenn Hirsch, who was my boss, who was my boss in the job before, who would find my boss on internship, said, Laura, your job has changed. So we're going to do something different now. We're going to work on trauma. We're going to work on 9/11. So I had a model for myself, that resiliency. We're going to embrace change. And that's what we teach teenagers. Your world has changed, but you're going to embrace it. You're going to figure out different ways to cope with it. And the second thing we teach teenagers is to work hard. So Glenn expected me to work hard. He still does. That has not changed. That's been consistent. I think teenagers, what I found after 9/11 was the amazing part is how many were resilient, how many really faced incredible adversity and came back to schools near ground zero and kept working hard, largely by the model of their parents who set that model. But kids also face typical adversities as adolescents. On December 5th, I was sitting in my office with a teenage girl who was coming to me for depression. She had made a previous attempt to take her life, but she's brilliant. So she had applied to colleges. And our appointment was from 3:45 to 4:45. It was 4:45 and she wasn't leaving. I'm like, okay, we can continue to talk. And she goes, this is the day. This is the day for what? I find out early decision. I'm like, oh, okay, when do you find that out? 5 o'clock. So we're going to sit and wait. How they do it, this is great. I don't know who thought of this. You go on their website, you log in, and there's a countdown clock.
Yeah.
And so we were counting down, 29, 28, 27, and I'm thinking to myself, I know exactly what to do and how to help her when she gets in. That's great, we can congratulate her, we can use labeled praise, I learned that when they were 3. What do I do if she gets deferred or rejected? How do I help her use those coping skills that we've been saying, that losing is good, it's important to lose. Those soccer trophies that you got just because you were on the field, you had no idea how to play, that was good that you got those, but you're going to lose, okay, and what are you going to do? And then I'm saying, okay, remember, you applied to other schools, you wanted to go to this Ivy League because your partner was going there, but you know what, we don't like that partner anyway, so we're going to break up with them. I'm going through all this in my head, and you know what, so now we're down to 5 seconds. And, she's got her iPad and she looks, okay, she gets deferred. And the amount of resilience this girl showed, and she said, well, Laura, you've read my essays. My essays for the other schools were better, weren't they? And I said, actually, they were. I have faith that you're going to make. This is not a prize to be won, but a match to be made, and you're going to find the college that suits you best. The amount of resiliency in this girl who had faced such psychopathology in her own life and adversity, by losing sometimes is how we learn how to face those things. So sometimes all the things that our teens go through, whether it be college applications, their first poor grade, their actual not getting a trophy for just sitting on the field, are ways that we can help them. And again, we're the model. For teenagers, we're really the model. Even though they like their peers better, there's still an important role.
But a lot of what teens go through happens in the school. My question is, how important is the school in helping us as parents, you as clinicians, helping children to develop
I
resiliency?
think schools are essential in building that resiliency. And I think one of the things that schools do these days, sometimes they inadvertently do the right thing, and purposefully, that wasn't movement. They ask kids to do community service. And that idea of contribution, of giving back, is so important for resilience, because even when you feel that you don't feel great about yourself, you know what's great? When you've done something and someone thanks you, it gives you that ability to say, I have control in the world. I am important. That locus of control is not everyone doing things to me, but I can affect the world. I can affect change positively. So even simple things like asking kids to do community service, giving them coping skills in school. One of the exciting projects that the Child Study Center is doing is a risk and resiliency class in one of the high schools, the New York City public high schools. The interesting part is my daughter goes to the high school where we're piloting it, so she's like a little spy, and I ask her, is it working? Do you get it? You know, but those kind of programs where even New York City public schools are embracing those and asking, say, our kids need more than just high standards in academics. They have to be able to cope. So schools, I think, see this as a need and want to embrace it when they can.
And hopefully you're moving in the right direction on that.